Hello, I'm Toycat and welcome back to my second channel video. Today I wanted to dive into the controversial matter of which country around the world has the best benefit or social security systems. This is quite controversial because it's very easy to just look at tax rates around the world and view things through the lens of like, okay, which countries are the most expensive to live in terms of how much of your money goes to the government. In case you're curious, you can look at the federal sales tax map and then you combine that with the personal income taxes by country, and you can see that Belgium is perhaps the highest tax country in the world because you pay over 50% of your income to various income taxes, and then you also pay a 21% VAT anytime you buy anything, which means that anytime you earn money, half it goes to the government. Anytime you spend money, about a fifth of it goes to the government too. And so this is something that obviously you can look at and say, well, it doesn't matter how much your money goes to the government, it matters what they do with it. In other words, it's not the size of your government that matters, it's what they do with it. And today, I wanted to kind of address that because although I think there is a philosophical debate about, well, who is better equipped to spend your money, you or the big entity of all of us combined, which we call governments, but I think rather than talking about it from that angle, instead, let's look at maps that show the best benefit systems in the world. Actually, there's only one map. Here is the map that shows the share of social protection expenditure as a percentage of GDP, i.e. of the total amount spent in a country. What is spent on social protection, i.e. all the benefit systems stacked together, and this shows you what you would probably expect from the map, that Western Europe plus Japan, Greece, and surprisingly, Serbia and Ukraine are some of the highest spending countries when it comes to social expenditure. And then there's like a second tier of like the developed world that you can expect. And then there's the third tier, which is like countries that don't have so much of their money to spend on social protection because they're spending it on all the other things instead, like trying to hold a country together, or all of these different things that might happen. And so boom, this is the easy map that shows which country has the most spending on benefits. However, it gets more complex when you dive into individual benefits as an example, because again, when you try to view social protection as an entire group, because we usually group things in that way because they're entirely discretionary spendings, they're the government giving money to various groups that it has decided are worthwhile. When you group them together, things get a bit muddy, so let's look at things one by one. Like for instance, retirement benefits. This is the retirement benefit paid out by country, and then also compared to the amount that an average pensioner spends, and then it works out the amount difference between the amount the government gives you and the amount that you need to live for a life. As you can see, Scandinavian countries coming out pretty strong as you'd expect, and surprisingly, the UK, despite being in the greenest category, does have some of the weaker pension benefits out there when compared to the cost of living. As you can see, wow, we're in the red category, a $4,000 to $6,000 gap between what the government gives you every year and what you would average need to spend. However, the argument there is that, well, private pensions make up the gap here, right? However, is that a fair argument? Should private pensions have to fill in the gap? Isn't the point of the pensions being done by the government that no old persons have to starve or, not have the lights on whatever? There you go. Now you've got the already you get into the thing of like, well, okay, things are complex. It gets more complex though when you talk about unemployment benefit. Is this the ultimate benefit? One day you might lose your job. Should your country be there for you if you do? In the cases of the light green countries, yeah, the government has generally got your back in almost every situation. In the green countries, about a third to two-thirds of people, yeah, government's got you covered. And in the other countries, yeah, unemployment benefits are a little bit different. In the dark blue countries, what do you mean unemployment benefits? You stop working, what's the deal with that? This is actually one of those very hard things to prove. Like, I actually did decide to look just for curiosity. Like, Saudi Arabia is in dark blue. That can't be right, especially UAE as well. I feel like if you're unemployed in those countries, you must get something. And I confirmed, as you can see right here, Saudi Arabia, it's an economic welfare state with free medical care, unemployment benefits, and it doesn't do it from taxes, it does it from oil revenue. So ultimately, $534 for 12 months. Actually, so I guess that's what it is. You get 2,000 Saudi Arabian rials, I want to say, for 12 months. And, okay, that's not really benefits, though. That's just being paid $500 a month for a year. Or is that benefit? I mean, you could argue Turkey's system, where you contribute 1% of your money to unemployment funds, or 2%, and your employer contributes 1%. Then after 600 days, you can get money back. That's not really a benefit system. That's a government-mandated insurance system, no? So really, even though, like these countries are in the colors that they are, there's more complexity to it that kind of isn't being met by this map, which is kind of the problem with trying to show something as complex as how a government decides to give money to its people. Have you ever tried to file for any government program? It's never just, oh yeah, are you a, are you a citizen and slash or taxpayer? Here's the cash we owe you. It's, I know it's like trying to get money back from a friend that like, owes it to you, and he knows he owes it to you, but like he wants to be reminded, and he's like, oh yeah, just tell me again how much do you owe me? Okay, I'll get that to you like next Friday. And then next Friday runs around, he's like, ooh, you didn't fill in form B1, so of course I'm not giving you your money back, friend. That's my experience of government. At least, speaking of my experience of government, healthcare expenditure is another great one, right? Because being unemployed is going to happen to some people. Retiring is going to happen to some people, but hopefully that by that time you don't, like the richest people generally in society are the oldest because you've had a whole lifetime to accrue wealth. And so, really the thing that, is the great equalizer is healthcare. Healthcare is the one that people often pick on when it comes to the United States. Like, oh, don't you want to join the league of great nations that have universal healthcare, i.e. healthcare is a benefit from the government. I don't pay for insurance, I pay taxes, and the taxes are my insurance, which, sounds great if you were to say that taxes are the same amount with or without the health insurance included, but I mean, it's actually a very different analogy, right? But the thing is like, yeah, this is the interesting thing here is that if you were to, this is why using this first map as an example of which country is the best to its citizens is a little bit misleading, is because, yeah, actually, if you look at the amount spent per country on healthcare, the highest in the world is the United States. It's by a pretty healthy amount too, in real terms, and even per capita terms. It's like, yeah, the US spends the most, but, and you might say, but this isn't government healthcare spending to look at, this is overall, and obviously a lot of it is private, and that's why it's so bad. No, okay, here is the map that just shows domestic general government health expenditure as percentage of government expenditure, and as you can see, the only countries in the same category as the US, the USA, Ireland, Iran, and Japan, there's 4 of them in the world. Also, I think Uruguay. So there's 5 countries in the world that spend as much money as a percentage of GDP on healthcare from their, percentage of government spending. The US has the world's largest, healthcare benefit-based program. It's just it doesn't cover all of their citizens. Is that good, though? Is that good an example of great government spending because they're spending so much on it and they really care about healthcare? Or is it an example of terrible government spending that, like, wait, America spends more than the UK does, but only covers, I think, old people, people with less money, poor people, and I want to say veterans too. I could be wrong about that one. There's like 3 groups the American government covers, but covering those 3 groups, and by the way, it's not universal for those 3 people, it covers some percentage. Covering those groups of people costs more than covering everyone because of the way the system is set up, or because of the overall expense of providing healthcare, you could say. Whatever it is, which healthcare system is better? The universal-based one in like the UK, as an example, or Canada, or the one where they spend more money and cover fewer people. I mean, obviously you would all agree covering more people for less, covering more people better for less would be better. But, that's the misleading thing about spending money, isn't it? They're truly, like some maps like this one show, okay, so let's not care about the one that we can always dunk on America for is paid maternity leave around the world. Every country has some amount of you must be paid this amount by your employer if you have a baby because you're busy having a baby or whatever else. There is no mandatory paid leave for mothers in the United States. But this is the thing, right? Well, first of all, is this the largest benefit needed in the world? If you are a mother, one could argue that like, well, can't you like choose to be a parent? If you are a poor, if you need unemployment benefit, if you need healthcare, surely those are the things you can think about. Like, should you cover that? But like, is being paid from your job a benefit that you require? Some could argue. But the other thing about this is like, okay, so a lot of countries are really good with maternity leave. Unlike the United States, for example, which by the way, also United States as well as I want to say Guyana and Papua New Guinea give no paid maternity leave. However, countries like India, which give a ton of maternity leave, give no paternity leave. This is the paternity leave map. As you can see, it's 14 weeks or more in a lot of countries, but a lot of countries that just gave a ton of maternity leave, like Iran is another example, are just like, no. Yeah, that is the woman's job having the child. What are you doing, man? Get to work tomorrow. And so is that is that a... You could argue that like that is a benefit, right? The government is giving to you, but like, is that actually a benefit the government's giving you, or is that a benefit your government is forcing your employer to do? Or to put this another way, is there a net good when they force, because again, you can actually totally look at this and say, well, America has true equality, no paid leave for anyone. And could you argue it's sexist that there is a difference in other countries, or could you argue that's actually the more logical way? Because Switzerland is another crazy example where they have pretty decent maternity leave. No paternity leave. That's an agreement between you and your employer. If you want to work that out, you can. It's an interesting argument to have, right? Speaking of interesting arguments, here's an interesting one. Child benefits. Are child benefits something the government should provide? Again, because I was kind of hinting on it here, but like, yeah, we can all agree that at some point you might become unemployed. At some point you're going to retire. At some point you need healthcare. But like, not everyone has children. That is a select group in society that make this big decision, that a lot of people hate. You ever see children? Have you seen them? Have you heard them? I bet you haven't heard them if you think they're good. But like, yeah, so like, that if you're not going to have children, these are all things that, will not affect you. And so even though they're a part of the total spending that make this map true, so, like obviously high public spending in the Scandinavian, Western European countries. But like, even though that's true, like, is it really fair if those benefits go to things that you don't actually care about, or maybe even don't think people should have? This is effectively the government subsidizing children. Every time I look up the way child benefit works, I'm like, wait, really? You just get money for having children? Like, there's no questions asked about it? The amount it's shocking the way this works, but it's true. This is the one, by the way, this is in the UK at least, the child benefit is one of the few benefits where there's no, oh yeah, don't worry guys, we'll get you, and then they never get you sort of situation. It actually is a benefit they just give to you, no questions asked. It's pretty swell, but I don't have children, don't intend to have children, kind of a bummer. And maybe that's me speaking from selfishness here, but the final map I wanted to show you is paid annual leave. This is a really interesting other example because this is the one everyone needs to do. Every single person in the world needs to leave their job to do, I don't know, what do you leave your job to do? To go on holiday? Do you perhaps go to British Columbia perhaps? And if you don't know, as I record this video, I had a flight 3 days ago that I missed because my COVID test that you have to do before you fly came back positive. That was fun. That was good. Enjoy. Look at my Canada t-shirt. It says Canada A. Look, I was ready to look at Kamloops. Look at it. There's a town here and there's a Tim Hortons and everything. I'm always surprised when I find that there's small towns in Canada. I picture it being just 10 big cities and nothing else. Anyway, so tangent aside, paid annual leave, so you can go to places like Canada, This is something that everyone needs to do, and so having paid annual leave is of course important. In the UK, you are statutorily given 20 days of paid annual leave, which it says 4 or more weeks. 20 days is not 4 weeks, but I know because you get weekends off. But not everyone does get weekends off. But my point here is this is one of those benefits from the government that doesn't actually add anything to the total spending. The government forcing your employer to pay you for 4 weeks a year is effectively just them saying, okay, pay even you could argue they're paying you slightly less for the rest of the year so they can pay you for the days you're not working, or it's just forcing them to pay you on days that you're not working. And so even though American government does not force that, this is mandated, does not force employees to work on these days, in reality, every American I've ever met who ever does any job gets at least 2 weeks off, as like a again, this is just my personal experience, but every single American spoken who gets at least 2 weeks off is just, if you don't have paid time off, you'll go crazy and shoot everyone up, and we don't want that. And so, couldn't you really argue that this is an unfair map? In the same way that this retirement benefit map is like, well, yeah, we have private pensions in this country. The majority of people do, at least. And so are these fair things to say? Honestly, this is the problem with talking about any government spending, is every country's social setup is different. You'll notice how in most of these maps, like Africa looks like it's coming up weak, but most African countries, or the African countries I'm familiar with, gonna be honest with you, I don't know what's going on in Chad. Can't tell you a single thing about the Central African Republic, but the African countries that I do know about and spoken to people from, there's a much stronger social structure, and so for them, they don't need the benefit system as much because you have family and you have closer connections. And so things are, like the very systems we rely on are kind of like impossible to put out in maps in any real way. Finding maps for this video even was very tricky. That's why they're all using very different keys that are terrible. And I guess what my point of this whole video is here to say is that the whole concept of what is a good benefit system versus a bad one really depends on what you want from it. Really depends on which groups you want to benefit the most. Is it mothers? Is it fathers? Is it people who are sick? Is it unemployed people? Is it retired people? We haven't spoken about disability benefits. Couldn't find a single version of that. But like, some number of people are just going to be disabled in a country and unable to work. Are they the most important group to prioritize or the least important? Because, like, either you can argue that they never, unlike unemployed people who have at least some amount of it that's their fault, or retired people where they had a whole lifetime to make that money and they didn't. Disabled people, what are you going to say to them? Like, you shouldn't have been born disabled? Not really an option. And the same thing with healthcare, right? Like, health, it might just happen randomly to you. You might get cancer tomorrow and lose all your money, is the common example people give for the United States. My point with this video is just that, or even within these benefit systems, right? So the UK's benefit system covers 2/3 of people according to this map right here. Sorry, 1/3 to 2/3. But if you compare the UK and the US, which are in the same color, I much prefer the US's unemployment system. So here's the UK. In the UK, you get job seekers allowance, which is £58.90 per week if you're 18 to 24, or £74.35 per week if you're over 25. Oh, last year I now get, my unemployment benefit goes up to £74.35. Do you know how little £74.35 is? I mean, at one point our currency was super strong and maybe you could argue that was a huge amount. I'll give you a clue. £74 is not enough for unemployment benefit. You need to claim, in addition to that, a ton of additional benefits if you want to actually live. And so unemployment benefit here is really wacky. Whereas in the US, it's effectively no unemployment benefit. It's unemployment insurance programs. Every state has them. It's not federal, which is why it's harder to like track. But like, you can get up to $855 a week depending on what your job was before that. And so, I mentioned this before actually. Wait, I'll mention on the down low, but someone who was close to me in my life got unemployed and their unemployment benefits were like roughly their income before. And then because of COVID, they got like an extra $600 a month or whatever, or 600 a month or whatever it's meant to be. And so they got paid more for being unemployed than for being employed, which is obviously perverse incentives. And so that's an unemployment system where it's so good that it's bad. But the unemployment system in the UK is just so bad that it's bad. It's like, yeah, if you're unemployed, not our problem. Try and, you better hope that. Also, by the way, that £74 a week only applies if you have less than £16,000 of savings. And you get it reduced by £1. If you have over £6,000, it gets reduced by £1 every week. And it's like, what is what? We don't really have an unemployment-based system in the UK. We'll say we have it, and it's great for when you are between like 18 and 20 something. Like, every one of my 18-year-old friends got it at some point. But even then, by the way, do you want to... Can I rant even more? That like, yeah, it seems really great on paper. On paper, our system is more fair because it's the same amount for everyone. But if you look into how it works, you have to do, I want to say 30 hours of work a week in exchange for your £56. Like, it's significantly less than minimum wage. Okay, so yeah, you've got to do, what is it? It's not saying right here, but you have to do, yeah. There's some absurd amount of hours you have to spend looking for jobs every week, and so it's an exercise in paperwork more than anything else, like I said, which is the crazy thing. But then in reality, anyone who is unemployed for an extended amount of time just gets disability benefit with a dodgy thing. So like that, I've known multiple of my exes, multiple people in my life have disability that maybe don't exist, that maybe previously existed, and when they expired, long story short, what I'm trying to say in this video is actually trying to compare these systems to each other is really, 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 really hard. And I've been trying to make this video for a while because I think it's the most interesting one to talk about. But this map is hugely misleading because what we see as social protection can be a whole range of different things piled into one. And that was just my experience. It could be that I have a disproportionately high group of people in my life that have committed fraud. And with anything, there's always a percent of it that doesn't go to the right thing. Is that an excuse not to divert money to the good causes anyway? It's hard to say. But yeah, my point in this video is just to say that, man, what governments spend their money on, even just the small group, which is social protection expenditure, is so hard to work out. And even then we can argue, like, actually, isn't every piece of government spending some form of social protection? Because think about defense spending. I'm pretty, I'll put my cards on the table. I'm kind of anti, like, defense spending. Feels like money we could spend, or feels like money we could not spend on, you know, like attacking other countries or doing all those sorts of things. But in the same way, you can argue defense spending is a form of social protection, because hear me out, Ukraine, I learned about what's going on in Ukraine via the Ukraine Twitter feed. This is an official account, by the way, but like the Ukraine Twitter is posting memes, examples when appeasement actually worked. Your search did not match any documents. This is the real Ukrainian Twitter account, by the way. Like, yes, this is like, they're verified on Twitter. It's a real thing. They'll post memes like type of headaches, migraine, hypertension, stress, living next to Russia. And so arguably you could argue in a country like Ukraine, the most important social protection, it's not child benefit or unemployment benefit or healthcare spending, it's defense spending, right? You can make that argument. Whether it's correct or not, again, as someone who is not the biggest advocate for the military. Man, the Ukraine Twitter feed is a quirky one, huh? Anyway, speaking of quirky things, I hope you enjoyed this video. I don't understand. Is this what geopolitics is now? It's just having a Twitter account where you post memes. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you found it interesting. And just remember, things might look bad for you, but it could be worse. You could live in Belgium. Bye.